speaker is here.
Can anybody hear me? The mic's working? Good. Okay. Well, as Seb mentioned, my name is Frank Yoder, and I chair the advisory board at Lumenday, so I'm representing Lumenday. And as he also mentioned, what I'll be talking about is the how to create an Intuiface experience that integrates with POS and payments. So we're kind of unique in that we're not an agency. We actually build experiences for interactivity in the retail market, specifically QSR, but also other retail verticals. So to start out, I'd like to begin with a case study which will give us a foundation for what we're talking about. We're talking about transactional experiences. So at the beginning of a transactional experience that's running on a kiosk, for instance, and you've probably used these kind of solutions as you've gone to a quick serve restaurant, which QSR is what it's commonly referred to. It's a pretty name for fast food. As you've gone into a restaurant where you actually ordered your food from the kiosk, you're using a transactional experience. And you can build these with Intuiface. So the first screen might be what we call an attract screen or a splash screen. And this will be a 2 or 3 screens that actually rotate and round robin and let the customer know that they can order their food here at the kiosk. From there, you might have a few questions before they start their experience, such as whether or not it's going to be dine-in or takeout. Also, whether or not they're going to pay at the kiosk or pay at the counter. Our kiosk, quite often, we don't prefer to put money receivers in the kiosk because it's a real hassle. You've got to constantly change those, take the money out and make sure it has change, etc. So we typically only pay at the kiosk with credit card, debit card, etc. Then after that, you'll go on to a category menu. Once you've selected one of the categories, the menu will move to the side or the top or the bottom, wherever you have it created in Intuiface, and then all the items will be on the right-hand side. So the menu bar is strategically located on the screen during the whole transaction so that a user can easily go to other menu options. And in this particular experience, we put what's called a mini cart at the bottom. It's a shopping cart. It enables the user to see what they're ordering real time as they're ordering it and placing stuff in the cart. But there is also a cart button, if you can see it, small button right down there that if they click on that at any time, they can actually see the full cart, which is the middle illustration here. If they select an item to place it in the cart, then the first illustration will appear and they'll be able to see more detail about the item as well as select modifiers for the item. And in this retail transactional experience, the modifiers is one of the more complicated and difficult things to tackle. In this illustration, we only have one level of modifiers. So you're selecting a burger and then deciding whether or not you want lettuce, American cheese, etc. on it. That's one level, but sometimes you might have, instead of saying American cheese, it simply says cheese. And as you select cheese, then it gives you another level of modifiers, which might tell you whether or not you want American cheese, Swiss cheese, etc. And then sometimes you might create an experience that even has 3 levels of modifiers, which really gets challenging. Can be done, but it's just a lot more work. And then, of course, the last screen would be your thank you screen. I think I've got... Okay. All right, so the agenda of the presentation that I'm going to be giving you is covering the hardware, software, service, and case study. That little case study we showed up front was just to make sure that you understand what we're talking about when I refer to a transactional experience. On your hardware, you usually have 3 different footprints, either floor standing kiosk, a countertop model, or a wall mounted model. The floor standing and the wall mounted are what I call semi-permanent. Once you place it on the floor, you usually have to bolt it to the floor or place it on the wall. You're going to mount it on the wall. whereas the countertop is more free. You can move it around to different places in your store. There are a lot of things that actually go into the choice of what you're going to use, what footprint you're going to use in your store, where the foot traffic is, how much space you have, a lot of different factors like that. Also what the preference is of the patron of the restaurant. Of the hardware devices, these are the components that you'll have inside the device. First of all, touch screen with an on-screen keyboard. Scanners optional. Sometimes a transactional solution might need a scanner for scanning barcodes, UPC symbols, or coupons, whereas a payment device is always needed, and you can use chip, swipe, touch, etc. Printers, another optional device. In the past, it's been pretty required, but we're getting more into the phase where people are accepting an e-receipt emailed to them, which means you could possibly eliminate the printer. It's desired to eliminate the printer if you can, because then you have no moving parts in your kiosk, less problems, and you also don't have to change out the paper now. There are other devices you may want on your hardware, such as a camera, speaker, microphone, ADA panel. ADA stands for American Disabilities Act. I think here it's European Accessibilities Act. The software. Now in the software stack, we use Intuiface for the front end of the stack and the experience, obviously. Interfaces with custom interface assets that we've created. And then those customer interface assets actually use APIs and SDKs from third-party companies that integrate with the printer, the payment device, etc. The reason we like to use Intuiface for the front end is because it separates the front end from the back end. The front end also gives you the ability to use a lot of tools that have been built for you in Intuiface, such as the design accelerators. And we really like these because they allow us to create a templatized solution. So we can create different templates that we can use on different clients. So we build it once, use it many. And the back end is, of course, using an Intuiface interface asset that we've created. And this gives us the ability to use common code, again, reusability from customer to customer. And of course, Intuiface supports Windows, iOS, and Android, which is a big plus. Here's an example of what we've created for an Intuiface experience using a templatized approach. The first section, as I mentioned before, is an attract screen or a splash screen, and that can be multiple screens so that it gives a change up in it's constant moving, every 6 to 12 seconds, so that the customer is not bored by what's on the kiosk. Also, after you select the attract screen, the category menu will appear, and then once you select something on the category, the product list for that category will appear, and then when you select that individual item, then the detail will appear. And sometimes we have multiple detail screens for a particular item. From there you go on to a cart screen, and then optional screens may appear at the end, such as asking for email entry if you're going to send them an e-receipt, or discount codes or loyalty entry if you're going to sign them up for a loyalty program, and then obviously a thank you screen. So you see, by using the Intuiface design accelerators, we can create these screens. For instance, on the category menu, we can have one where it's got the menus at the top, or another one with the menus at the side, or the menus at the bottom, menu items. And then we can simply reuse it depending upon which customer wants what. Now in the Composer, the interface assets for us have been the key to making the integration to payment devices, as well as for integrating to the receipt printers and also the POS system. So for the payments, there's a few different ways you can interface with payment cards. First of all, you can build your own payment device integration. Now in this case, you're integrating directly with the payment terminal. A lot of times people refer to this device as the POS. That's actually inaccurate. The POS system is the point of sale system, and this is the POI, which is the point of integration. So it's the payment terminal that is a component of the POS system. So you can actually directly integrate with the POI device using the API or SDK that manufacturer has created and made available to you. In our situation, we have integrated to all the Verifone devices, and they provide a PSDK, which enables us to build a Intuiface interface asset that directly integrates to the POI. Now that's a nice approach because then you're payment processor agnostic. You don't care if they're using WorldPay, FreedomPay, any of the other payment processors, because you're talking to the device. The second approach is to actually talk to a payment processor. Now the payment processors such as FreedomPay, WorldPay, they all create an API which they make available to you, and then you can actually talk to their service, which is basically a wrapper around the API to the device. And in their wrapper, they also talk to their network. Now in that case, you're talking to another API, and again, you build an interface asset that will actually integrate to their API, and then it integrates in turn to the POI. But the disadvantage of that, which we've done also, is the fact that now that integration that you've built using the interface asset will only interface with that payment processor. Whereas the first choice, where you've integrated to the device, means you're agnostic to the payment processor, so as you go from customer to customer, it still works. Doesn't matter what payment processor they're using. And then the last one is Lumenday's created this integration in a interface asset that we call Transact, and that is available. Now, one thing I might mention about payments is there is something called PCI compliancy, which is a real pain in the butt. So you want to avoid PCI compliancy, and by integrating to either the payment processor or the POI device, you've avoided it because you're putting all the onus on PCI compliancy on the APIs or the manufacturers. So basically what you do is you hand off the dollar amount at the end of the transaction. Once they've added everything to the cart and they've said pay now, then you using the API call, say $34.95, please charge. Now the API of either the payment processor or the POI device manufacturer will then pop up on the POI device and say, please scan your card, and it'll put the dollar amount on there, $34.95, and then they will go through the process of doing it. Now you're not controlling what's going on the device, and their software is doing that, whether it's the manufacturer or the payment processor. And that's a good thing because you have no control over whether or not they've, what their credit card number was that was scanned in or their PIN that was typed in. You don't see that, you don't access it from your Intuiface experience. That's crucial because that means you don't have to be PCI compliant. If you were to write all the code to do that, then you would have to be PCI compliant. The other integration is to the printers, and specifically the receipt printers, and there's three options that you can do here. First of all, just like the other payment integration, you can build an Intuiface interface asset to interface with the payment receipt printer. And the makers of the printers will actually provide an API enabling you to do that. In our case, we've done to the two most popular ones in the QSR industry, which are the Epson printers and also the Micronics. Also, you could also, because we have done this integration, your second option would be able to use the Transact interface asset that's already been integrated to these Star Micronics and Epson printers. And also, you have to build a template for this receipt so that from customer to customer, you can tweak the template, but you don't have to rebuild it. You've used a templatized approach to the receipts also. And then the third option would be if you don't have to print, which would be great, then you can simply send out an email receipt, and then you don't need to integrate with any printer in that situation. Now the point of sale integration is the heavy lifting. That's the hardest of all these integrations. And again, the way to do that is the point of sale manufacturers, especially the large ones, they provide APIs which enable you to integrate to them. 3 different ways you can get this done. First of all, you could integrate to the POS solution directly, which means you're going to have to fill out an application and ask them for permission to integrate to them. Some of these POS companies are extremely strict. NCR is especially one that's hard to integrate to because they will deny or apply your application based on if they see you as competition. They have their own kiosk and their own kiosk software, and so they quite often do deny companies the ability to integrate with them. The other thing about this is it usually costs money. So you have to put up a certification fee to begin with. Whether they end up certifying you or not, you lose that fee. It also takes a long time because at the end of the process of your development, then they will certify you, and you're basing your timeline on when their certification team is available because they have other projects going on. So I've seen it take anywhere from 6 to 10 months to get integrated to a POS vendor. Now the other approach, and the one we like, is to build an interface asset that will integrate directly to middleware. Now there's different middleware vendors such as Omnivore, Olo, ChowNow. These companies have done integration to all the major POS systems, and so you're on their piggyback. You ride on their rails. So they've done an integration, and you simply use their API in your interface asset, and then you can, at that point in time, simply point to Micros or Aloha, PosiTouch, Dinerware, whatever POS you want to integrate to. You're simply integrating to Omnivore or Olo, for instance, and they're taking care of the back-end integration. The drawback about that approach, by the way, that can be done pretty quickly. You can get that up and running in typically 4 to 6 weeks, maybe less if you dedicate time to it. But the key there is you're going to have a recurring fee. So you either eat that yourself or you pass that on to the customer. Either way, it's going to make your solution be more expensive to the customer because you're now dependent upon their middleware. But the other advantage as the POS vendors change their structure, their format, their database, middleware is responsible for making those changes, so you don't have to worry about that. That's a headache that they alleviate. And then the last is we've actually built an interface asset, Transact, again, that interfaces with both Omnivore and Olo, so we're integrated to all the POS vendors. So as summary, you've got payments, receipts, and the POS. These are your 3 main integration points for a transactional kiosk, and it doesn't matter if we're talking QSR or if we're talking retail where you're selling t-shirts and tennis shoes. It's all the same. You present a menu of items, they select them, put them in their shopping cart, they hit pay now, you send this order off, you take their payment, and also print out the receipt. I'll show you a couple pictures real quick, and then we'll go into a Q&A period. These are some case studies or print screens of different ones, and you'll see the recurring theme, a splash screen, category of menus, and then in this case, on the third one, once they selected one of the categories, the menu bar moves to the top, and all the items, in this case for hot drinks, are located below. And also, if you'll notice on there, there's no mini cart at the bottom. So this was done in the interest of giving more real estate for all the products. 2 different ways to select modifiers in these first 2 screens. The first one, you chose perhaps a dozen donuts. Now you can populate that dozen donut purchase with dragging and dropping the donuts into the cart. Interesting UI way to select modifiers. And in this case, you might think the donut is the item, but the box of a dozen is the item that you're purchasing, and the individual modifiers are the individual donuts you'll select. And on the second one, you're selecting a hot drink, looks like hot coffee, and there's plenty of modifiers. You can see how this gets complicated really quick with all the different options you can do to a cup of coffee. This is an endless aisle retail endless aisle example that we've done, and this Strand and Company, it's a fictitious company. So the first thing we do is, again, present 3 different splash screens, have them rotate. Once the person touches the screen, then the menu, in their case, was more creative. It takes over the whole screen in different size blocks. And then once they select one of those menu items, the menu bar then becomes not visual, but, well, there's no pictures. It's just a bar up top. So it is a menu bar at the top, but it's very small and minimized, so to speak. They've used all their real estate for the product that they're going to select. And in this case, we've also created 2 different detail screens. So once you select an item, it'll show you a picture of the item, what colors you can get it in, the sizes you can select at that time. If you actually touch the item, the picture, the image, it'll open up a second screen, which gives you more detail of the item, and in this case, trying to show you a close-up of the texture of the material that's being used. And then, of course, the third screen shows you the cart and everything you might want to do at that point in time. Also, they've got a recommended for you bar at the bottom based on your purchase. That's all I have at this time, and I'm opening up the floor for questions if we've got about 4 minutes left. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Thank you for the speech. It was very good. And I'm more interested in, I'm assuming that you've done it for many years before you met Intuitive. So what tools did you use before and what tools did you use before and how does it change your business?
We have done applications for many years. We were always a .NET company, so we would build stuff from scratch, custom software development, and it would be different for every customer. With Intuiface, we're able to build it once, build a solution, a product that can be customizable for different companies. So we were excited about that. Yes?
Thanks a lot again. When you integrate with the POS, what do you get from the POS? What kind of data? The pictures, the pricing, the top?
That's a good question. In fact, I failed to mention that. There's really 2 points of integration with the POS system. The one at the beginning is you pull information down. So you get the images, the prices. And by the way, it depends on what your POS system will give you. For instance, some of them don't store images, and so they don't give us, and we had to store them somewhere else ourselves. But you want to get the prices, the details of all the products, and the categories. Now, that's getting all the information from the POS at the beginning before you paint your menus. At the end, when they place the order, you have to pass off to the POS system. Here's the order and here's all the items. That then goes into their system, gets presented on the KDS, Kitchen Display System, so the cooks know what to make, and also it goes into their accounting. By the way, integrating, getting the data down from POS is the ideal situation, because then you only have one source of information. If you can't get the information from the POS, what we've had to do is store the information either in the cloud in a database such as Airtable or Excel on the hard drive. Then you have to maintain 2 databases and you have to make sure they're updated. And it's a real pain, but it can be done. Any other questions? Thank you.